And welcome to everyone. First of all, Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon everyone. But Malik is doing a great job. But I want everybody to take a second just to reflect and remember the name Silas Muhammad. And after this webinar, then you can go and research the work that the Honorable Silas Muhammad has done and is doing. He was way ahead of his time, way ahead of his time. I didn't even understand when I was part of the nation out of prison when I was a youngster, when I joined the Honorable Silas Muhammad, but he's doing a great work and I'm here to help as well. My name is Ramzu Yunus. I'm a human rights policy officer, meaning one, and I have a group. Our group is called the Human Rights Policy Officers, not necessarily trying to be an organization, but trying to be a group of those who enforce our human rights. So our duty is to teach human rights, advocate human rights, help people to assert our human rights, and last but not least, to defend our human rights or against any forcible denial of our human rights. As we see right now, what's happening in the world, we see that there's not a shortage, as the human rights experts are saying, there's not a shortage of human rights organizations. The Commission on Human Rights, there's definitely not a shortage of our human rights, but what's missing is those who are willing to stand up and defend human rights and make sure people's human rights are not being violated. We see that right now, what's going on, not only amongst us, but what's going on in Palestine, occupied territory. The song that was playing when we first got on said, "Take it to the United Nations." Well, that case has been taken to the United Nations. Nothing is being done about it. So we have to become the United Nations enforcement arm ourselves. There's something called the Declaration on the Right and Responsibilities of Individuals, Groups, and Organs of Society to promote and protect universally recognized human rights and fundamental freedoms. In that declaration, it's a resolution, it's a United Nations General Assembly resolution, gives us the power to do something ourselves if nations fail. So we can't continue to look to the United Nations when we have the power to assert it ourselves. So I just want to preface what I'm about to say on unity, starting with that on who we are and what we are trying to encourage others to do. I was asked to speak on what unity means to me and my group in the reparations movement. I first want to quote a scripture from the Bible. It says, "How can two walk together unless they be agreed?" How can two walk together unless they be agreed? So first of all, we have to agree to come together. Now we got to agree to the destination that we're walking to. What destination are we trying to get to? And we have to agree to the route that we're taking to get to that destination. Of course, the purpose of this call is the destination, that is reparations. So first we have to define that destination is reparations. But some of us, if we say reparations, you're still going the wrong way because we don't have a proper meaning of reparations. We don't know the definition of reparations. It's been promoted in the wrong light. Reparations is not a big check being cut for Black people. Let me quote something by our great comrade attorney Malik mentioned, Chokwe Lumumba. In 1988 in the New York Law School Journal of Human Rights, human rights attorney, by the way, Chokwe Lumumba said, "The political essence of slavery is not merely found in economic exploitation of labor, but in the illegal imposition of United States jurisdiction over the slave or slave's descendants. Full reparation must relieve any imposed political status." Now, this is what Comrade Chokwe Lumumba wrote at the Law School Journal in 1988. Defining reparations for us, it's bigger than the labor. What about the political status? So reparations is self-determination.
Yes, sir.
And definitely we must read write this down, the basic principles and guidelines on the right to a remedy and reparation for victims of gross violations of international human rights and serious violations of international and humanitarian law. That would tell us what real reparations is. And the first part of reparations is restitution, giving us our liberty back. So like Chokwe Lumumba said, it is self-determination. It is changing our political status that they illegally imposed on us. So we're talking about unity right now. We're talking about unity because we have to have the same definition, the same destination, and that's reparations. And now that we know the real meaning of reparations, we mean it's inseparable from self-determination. So those distinctions have to be made. In 1967, in a meeting in Frogmore, South Carolina, Dr. King, with his organization, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, he made this statement. You can read it in the transcripts. He said, we were seeking to reform certain conditions in the house of our nation because the nation wasn't living up to the conditions that it has prescribed in the Constitution. Then, after Selma and the Voting Rights Bill, we moved into a new era, which must be an era of revolution. I think we must see the great distinction between a reform movement and a revolutionary movement. Now, I'm going to translate that right on down to modern times inside of this reparations movement. As a reparations movement, we have been seeking to reform this nation because it hasn't lived up to the rules it has prescribed in international law, which includes self-determination and reparations. Then, after our petitions, our protests, our march, we have moved into a new era, which must be an era of revolution. I think we must see the great distinction between a reform reparations movement and a revolutionary reparations movement. We're talking about unity. How can two walk together unless they be agreed? Peace. Now, we got to humble ourselves. I'm not trying to offend anybody, but if Dr. King was humble enough, and he's probably more known than any of us on this call put together, if he was humble enough to admit his error in seeking reform and switch to revolution from civil rights and human rights, we should be humble enough to do the same. So we should be humble enough to admit that our reform reparations movement is not cutting it. So we must move into a revolutionary reparations movement. We've seen what reform is: petitioning, asking, demanding, going to the United Nations. Now, what does a revolutionary reparations movement do? What's that? It's what our root organizations already proposed. It's what Master Fard Muhammad did on July the 4th, 1930, declared independence right there in Detroit on July the 4th, 1930. Then began building an FOI, a military unit, to assert that self-determination. A revolutionary movement is what the Republic of New Africa proposed in 1968 with their Malcolm X doctrine. Let me read it exactly. It says, I believe in the Malcolm X doctrine that we must organize upon this land and hold a plebiscite to tell the world by a vote that we are free and our land independent, and that after the vote, we must stand to defend ourselves, establishing the nation beyond contradiction. And recently, in 2018, it was announced that the Honorable Minister Farrakhan said they're having a vote as well for separation, because that's the procedure. That's the revolutionary way that our root organizations have proclaimed that we get our reparations and self-determination. The chairman of that hearing, Dana T. Rohrabacher, I think out of California somewhere, he said that everybody in the United States has the right of self-determination. He said that even if the people of San Diego, if they wanted to become part of Mexico, they have a right to vote on it. And he said, I'm sorry, then it's adios, San Diego. And what Malik just said with the plebiscite, that's how a revolutionary movement asserts the right of self-determination. It has already been laid out for us in a unified manner. But as the Quran says, we didn't become divided until knowledge. Now we got a little bit extra knowledge. We know more than Fard Muhammad. We know more than Elijah Muhammad. We know more than the founders of the Republic of New Africa. So we're going to develop our own avenues, our own mechanisms. So now we got a bunch of sects, as the Quran also says, celebrating within itself instead of uniting and focusing on the first mission statement that we had. So unity to me, unity to our group is coming together, becoming agreed, walking together, defining our destination first, which is reparations, which is self-determination, knowing the real meaning of reparations and the real meaning of self-determination, which is not the Kwanzaa definition. That's a containment definition. Self-determination means self-government. So once we agree on that, now let's agree on the route. And many of us already come from the Nation of Islam, come from the Republic of New Africa. So the route has already been defined for us. Let's go back to that route and hold the plebiscite vote and declare our independence and defend it beyond contradiction. Yes, and also, last but not least, before I close out, we do have to agree on the route, but one other thing we have to agree on: the speed. We're going to get to that route. Do you want to get from here to New York in 17 hours? Or you want to get to here to New York in a day? You want to walk to New York and take 5 months or whatever? What steps are we going to take and how fast are we going to take it? The path is already laid out for us. We got to stop relying on the system. That's a reform movement, relying on this system. When we have a right to just hold the vote, declare our independence, and boom, we are repaired. Last statement. Joe Biden gave us an alley-oop, but Negro leaders didn't see the alley-oop he gave us. He, of course, on purpose, he didn't give us the alley-oop. Joe Biden signed something called the New Atlantic Charter months after he came into office. The New Atlantic Charter. It was a commitment to the Old Atlantic Charter. The Old Atlantic Charter, point number 3, says, we wish to see those who have been forcibly denied. We wish to see self-government and sovereign rights being enjoyed by those have been forcibly denied from. That's us as Black people. So the president he just signed for our reparations, but it's something that we have to implement.
Yes, sir.
So not wait for them. So that's our unity. That's my statement for unity. We must be agreed on what reparations is and the route to get to that reparations. And that route definitely must not continue to rely on the system that damaged us in order for us to be needing repair in the first place. Thank you all for listening. Love you all. Salute.